Hello, welcome back to another episode of AuditTrails. Today we're going to be discussing SSPs, or System Security Plans. So this format's going to be a little bit different from my previous videos. Normally I walk through like a PowerPoint presentation with some high-level concepts and kind of dive into them a little bit. But with this video, we're going to go through a full SSP template. It's just kind of like a blank document with the appropriate headings and sections that you should have within an SSP. So let's go ahead and get started. So what's an SSP? So an SSP is a system security plan. It's a document that identifies all the functions and features of a system. So any hardware, any software, anything like that. And it also defines the security measures that have been or will be put in place to limit access to authorized users, to train people, users and system administrations, stuff like that. So it really includes all of the different details of processes for auditing, maintaining the system, in addition to how you plan to respond to security incidents. So incident management, stuff like that. So it's really a comprehensive summary of all your security practices and policies that will help keep data secure within your environment. So the reason we're discussing this today is that SSPs are required under NIST 800-171 and additionally CMMC. So in the past it would be write an SSP, do your self-attestation for NIST 800-171, and then as long as it really covers all of the different fields within 800-171 or control families, if you will, and you have done your self-attestation, it would be sufficient. But with CMMC coming up and really that whole assessment process, it's going to be very important for you and your organization to have a solid SSP that contains all of the appropriate fields and areas that are required under CMMC, because these independent auditors are going to want to review this document because really, like I said, it's a comprehensive summary and kind of detailed narrative of all of your security practices and policies. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Like I said, this is just a template that we're going off of provided to us by CMMC certification. So let's go ahead and get through this. So right at the very beginning, it's just going to be high-level information. So what's your organization, headquarters address, stuff like that, a revision history. This is all pretty standard within most SSPs that you'll see out there. So, and then we'll jump into the table of contents. So as you can see here, there's a lot of information within this document. So first, it's going to start off with the information system. So it's going to give high-level information about your environment, about specific information systems and kind of how they interact with each other. Then it goes into your subjective CMMC level, which in previous videos we talked about CMMC in great depth there. So there's 5 different levels, 1 through 5, 1 being the easiest, 5 being the most stringent as far as security goes. Most DoD contractors and organizations and stuff like that are going to be at level 3 for the most part. So then we go into the organization contacts. So who are your system owners, designated contacts? So an important point of contact would probably be like your CISO or something of that nature. And then it gets into practices. So this is where it's really going to break down each of those different control families and kind of areas of security measures, if you will. So that's where you'll have your access controls, asset management, audit accountability, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and keep scrolling down here and we'll keep picking away at this document just so you can see what it should look like, how it should look like when it's done, and everything like that. So list of figures, list of tables, this is pretty standard in any document like this. So here's the approvals. So any SSP should go through a review and approval process. It should be anybody that has an impact on security within your organization and kind of manages the overall cybersecurity or information security program should definitely have a say and approval on this document. So the information system. So what is the SSP? Kind of like I said, we just went over that. So it provides an overview of your security practices, describes the controls in place or planned for implementation for your desired level of CMMC to protect CUI. So with this template specifically, kind of fill in the blanks and go from there. So what is your information system? How do you abbreviate it? And what does it do? So it's important to really lay out what your information system does, kind of what type of environment you have, or multiple environments, if you will, and what is the description. Alrighty, so this is an important part of an SSP. So a network diagram, so you should really put your network architecture within this document. It's very important for not only outsiders like independent auditors or other people within your organization to know which components and how they interact with one another within your organization and your environment, specifically your information system environment. So where do things live, what is their role, and how do they interact with each other? And a lot of that can be understood and taken out of a network architecture diagram. So make sure that that is a part of your SSP. That's very important. So next, another diagram that's important is a system boundary diagram. So kind of visual depiction of your system boundaries. So separating in-scope components versus out-of-scope components. So that's very important, especially with protecting CUI, or controlled unclassified information. So does your environment have that type of data segregated into its own little area? So would that be out of scope for CMMC? That's just an example. So it's important to really define your system boundary and whether or not you have like separate CUI environments or stuff like that. So that can all be visualized and put within the SSP within your system boundary diagram. Alrighty, system interconnection. So IP addresses, where does it go, kind of services that your environment might use. These are all very important. Obviously, this is going to go a long way in telling how each component and kind of each system within those two diagrams that we discussed previously interact with each other. So I know we discussed the CMMC levels a little bit. If you want a little bit more in-depth review of all these levels, go and check out our previous CMMC videos, and it'll get a little bit more in-depth about each different level. Like I said, 1 is the least amount of security controls, 5 is the most. Most DoD contractors and organizations are going to live right at that level 3. So put your desired level, put your owners, your contacts. So this is all very high level information. So let's kind of jump into what the actual content of the SSP document for specific practices or controls are going to look for. So like we said, we discussed the different levels. So AC level 1, it's just going to talk about access control and really what's required for this specific practice. So limit information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users, stuff like that. So implementation details. This is where you would put in what your specific organization does or is doing to satisfy this specific practice. So something that's important. So you see how it breaks down these different levels here? So if you are a level 3 organization, you have to do level 1, 2, and whatever 3 is. So in this scenario, you'd have to do these practices here if you're a level 3 organization. There's no additional ones defined at the level 3. Alrighty, and then all of these in this content is going to be pretty similar, just going to be laid out differently for each practice. So let me scroll down into a different family, if you will, later in the template document. So here we go. Incident response. So it's going to be the same thing here. So level 2, there's a requirement to establish an operational incident handling capability for organizational systems. That includes preparation, detection, analysis, containment, recovery, and user response activities. So same thing, you would identify what your implementation status is. So is it already in place? Check that box. How so? Explain it to us. What's going on with your incident response capabilities? What are you running today, or what do you plan to run in the future that would satisfy these requirements? And this is how most SSP documents are kind of laid out, is they're really broken up by family or practice area, and then it goes into each individual required control and what your organization is doing to satisfy that control. This is pretty common within SSPs. And one thing to point out is that with with SSP templates that you'll find online is there's a ton of different ways to do them. So you can adopt this chart looking format. You can adopt just like a regular paragraph, like type it out kind of format, bulleted list, whatever is more comfortable for your organization. It's just very important that you make sure you capture all of these areas and all of the information that applies to each different practice. That's really important within an SSP. It's more so the content than it is the format. It's just there's plenty of templates out there. They're probably all going to look different, but I'm willing to bet the majority of them have very similar, if not the same kind of content and guidance. So as you can see, if we keep scrolling here, it looks almost identical. It just goes from practice information, different practice to different practice, and really lays out the requirements, and you explain what your organization does. So let's scroll down to the end, and it's probably going to end the document with a POAM template. Yep. So if you look at this, there's a POAM template. So POAM is a plan of action and milestone. So this is typically when there is something that does not meet a specific practice. You would develop a POAM and kind of discuss what your milestones are going to be. So your milestones are typically going to be, what does your organization have to do in order to satisfy a specific practice or control. So gives yourself a completion date, a deadline, what actions are going to be taken, stuff like that. So these are pretty common once you get into an SSP and get into an audit, because there's probably going to be some deficiencies and stuff that you'll have to correct within your organization, and that'll all be done within a POAM. So that being said, that's really it about SSPs. There's a lot of information. There's plenty of templates out there. Like I said, feel free to use any of them. All of them have majority of the same content. They're just laid out a little bit differently. So thanks for tuning in to another episode of Audit Trails.